Okay, hello again, everybody. I'm Carissa Spann, the board chair. This is our November DC Housing Providers Association meeting. We are meeting with the intent of understanding and learning more about the DC Housing Authority with all the new changes, all the great things that are happening, things that are taking place in the District of Columbia, which does impact DC housing providers and landlords. And for those of you who don't know, who are just joining and tuning in for the first time, I am Carissa Spann, the board chair. We meet every third Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. Formerly, prior to COVID, we were meeting at the DC Housing Authority. So now our meetings are online by way of Zoom. I'm going to now ask that Marcy Edwards, who is another board member, will come on and introduce herself. Marcy, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening. Marcy Edwards here. I'm, as Carissa said, a board member. And I want to just say thank you guys for taking time out to complete the survey that we put out. The goal of the survey was to pull together information and opinions from all of the housing providers that we have access to help us build kind of a case for DCHA to help them understand our needs and what's going on from our perspective. So thank you guys for filling that out. Please continue to do that. The survey will be up until the end of this week. If you don't have the link, we'll put it within the chat during this meeting. So thank you so much. We'll be pulling together all of the data from that, and then we'll share that with you guys at a future meeting as well. And just in case I skipped it, Marcy Edwards, board member, and I've been a landlord for a very long time in the District of Columbia. And so I'm just happy to be able to be working with the DC Housing Providers Association to help further us along. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Marcy. I'm going to ask that everybody mute yourself, please, unless you are a Housing Authority staff member or official.
4 burgers. Turn around. These 4 burgers cost us $5.
Give me 1 second. All right, so today joining us, we have DC Housing Authority department heads and some faces we know, some faces we do not know. So I want to take a moment to allow all of the DC Housing Authority family to introduce themselves so that those of you who have not seen their face, if you don't know their name, you can put a name with a face today. So I'm going to start with the first person who was here was Mr. Batson, I believe it was. So I'm going to start with you, Kirk.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Kirk Batson. I am the Relocation Orientation and Training Supervisor. I am half of the department that actually performs the briefings, issues vouchers. We work with the participants to involve themselves in our meet and lease events, where you as landlords, if you have units that you're looking to advertise, we assist you with advertising those units to our participants so that they can reach out to you to communicate their need and their desires for available units in the District of Columbia. And I believe most of you have my information and have been in contact with me previously. So thank you for allowing me to introduce myself. And next person up.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Batson. I'm coming to you, Ty Gary. You have the floor, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, Ty Gary, one of the inspection supervisors at DC Housing Authority Inspections Division. And I think I've been on here quite a few times. So for those who are not familiar with me, I believe everyone has my contact information.
Thank you so much for that, Ty. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening, everyone. I am Aisha Thompson, and I'm the Co-Deputy Director of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The divisions that I have who directly reports to me is the ROTC division, Relocation, Orientation, Training, and Counseling division, the Quality Assurance division, that's QA, and we also, and housing programs, which includes all of the local programs, federal programs, and contracts. Mhm.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Thompson. I'm coming to you, Anissa Jones.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anissa Jones. I am the other co-deputy of the Housing Choice Voucher Program ECOD division, which is eligibility and continued occupancy, and also inspections. And probably everyone has my information as well, but I can include it in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Anybody else from Housing Authority staff?
Yes, ma'am. My name, can y'all hear me?
Hey, Mr. Queen.
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? So my name is Devon Queen. I'm a housing program coordinator with the Housing Choice Voucher Program at DC Housing Authority. I do basically whatever I'm asked to do, but mainly I do recertifications, lease ups. I review our leasing package submissions. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. But once again, whatever I'm asked to do, I do it.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Queen. Who else do we have?
You have Brenda Donald. I'm the new executive director of the DC Housing Authority, and this is my first meeting with this group. Thank you so much, Span, for inviting me to be part of this. I've been anxious to meet with our landlord community and hear from you about some of your needs and concerns, and I'm happy to be here this evening.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Do we have anybody else from the DC Housing Authority before we move on? Is that it? Okay. All right. Well, we welcome you all. We thank you so much for your time and joining us today. And again, this is what we do. Once a month, we meet, we discuss concerns and issues that housing providers have, who are participants. They're housing providers who work directly with the DC Housing Authority. Many of the landlords who are here today, many who will watch the replay. And this is just a portion because there are thousands of landlords. But many who are here today have completed a survey. They have expressed their concerns. They have voiced their complaints. They have also expressed things that they are satisfied with. So one of the things that we like to do is share good news, not just the bad news. I have been a board chair. I've been on the board for at least 8 years. For those of you who don't know, I'm a former employee of the DC Housing Authority. I actually worked for housing for approximately 12 years. I left in 2006. When I left the DC Housing Authority, I did about 3 years with PG Housing Authority. I did about 1.5 years with Anne Arundel Housing Authority, and now I am in private sector. So my passion is helping landlords, my colleagues and peers, with trying to bridge the gap and helping to bring about change, because I recognize it's not easy being a landlord in the District of Columbia. And there are a lot of landlords or housing providers who are not knowledgeable about the processes with the agency, what role the agency play, because I believe that one of the biggest disconnects, and I'm going to have Marcy to come on and share some of the concerns based off of the survey that we've been conducting. But one of the biggest disconnects from what I can tell in my role here on the board is that some of the housing providers and landlords feel that the DC Housing Authority should be doing more acting in the capacity of the landlord. And so one of the things that I try to help people to understand is that the Housing Authority does not intervene. You all don't take on the role or responsibility as a landlord, but it's pretty much a housing subsidy for the tenants who are participating in the voucher program. So Marcy, I'm going to ask, if you will, if you can read and share some of the biggest concerns that you have been made aware of so far. I also want to acknowledge Miss Johnny Mae Durant. She is a former board member, and she's been a long-standing landlord and housing provider in the District of Columbia, as well as the landlord with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Miss Johnny Mae?
She's coming. She's not there yet.
Okay. All right. So in the interim of time, I'm going to have Marcy. Marcy, would you share, would you start? Now, here's what I do want to do. If you have questions for any of the Housing Authority staff, please drop it in the chat box. We want to go in order. We want to make sure that we are addressing everybody's concerns and questions. We will follow up with notes, which will include the questions that you are asking, you're sharing today. We are live on YouTube, so that anybody can watch the replay. Everybody will get a link. So periodically I'll check YouTube to see if people are asking questions on the YouTube channel. Marcy?
Hi, Carissa. I just need a few minutes to pull up that information, and then I can jump back on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So as Mr. Ty Gary shared, he has been on several times because at one point we had a lot of questions pertaining to the inspection process, the new way of doing things, the virtual inspections, the letters that are going out. And I can honestly say that there has been a significant increase and a change. So I do want department heads to know that landlords have expressed that things have changed. So kudos to inspections for the improvement. I know that COVID has been a challenge for so many of us. Me personally, and I'm also a HQS inspector as well, in addition to being a property manager and all of what I do. So I can personally say that the virtual inspection process, it was good on one hand, but I hated it because I had approximately 40 inspections in 1 week by different inspectors. So it made my life a lot more complicated than I wanted it to be. But we express our complaints with the inspections department. We've reached out to Anissa Jones and Ty Gary. They have made changes. Landlords have updated to say that they are getting the notification letters. They are receiving the emails. So 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up. If I had any extras, I would give more, but I just wanted to let you all know that we see the improvement, we see the progress. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And so again, if you're just joining us, we do have staff here from the DC Housing Authority. We have the new executive director who's here. We are big. Let me just say that we are big. The Housing Providers Association, we are big on communication. And that's been one of our biggest complaints as a group of housing providers, not receiving updates, not receiving communication promptly. I do know that there's new leadership with the agency. I can see the improvements. And so I would just ask that as you all make changes where possible, if you can just update us so that I can get less emails, because I don't know how to respond to emails if I don't know. But we thank you all for being here today. I see the comments that are coming in the chat box, and we are going to respond to the questions as they come in the chat box. We're here from 6 to 7 p.m. So we don't want to hold up everybody's time. I recognize that some of you had a long day. So if you have questions, if you're just joining us, please make sure that you drop your question in the chat box. Marcy, are you able to pull up some of the questions? And
well, I think one question that might be on a lot of housing providers' minds right now is, with the changes going on, there's a new director, and I believe there's a new commissioner in place as well. I think, it would be great to hear from the executive director to kind of hear what the plans are for, the changes that's going on right now at DC Housing. Like, what's the plan? How are housing providers included in that plan? in terms of, improving the overall performance of the DC Housing Choice Voucher Program.
Did you want me to respond?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to say a few words. Again, everybody, I'm Brenda Donald, the Executive Director. I started here in June as the Interim Executive Director and have become the, I don't know if permanent is the right word, but at least for the next 2 years, signed on in this role since August. So really, I've been here since June. As some of you may know me from previous roles, I've been a longtime public servant in DC government and in other jurisdictions, Maryland, most notably or most recently. But my background is primarily health and human services. I've served as deputy mayor over health and human services under 2 mayors. And also I was interim deputy mayor for greater economic opportunity under Mayor Bowser. I've run the Child and Family Services Agency 3 times. I was cabinet secretary in the state of Maryland over human services, which included TANF benefits and child welfare and child support. So I also ran the Office on Aging on an interim basis. So primarily my focus has really been about serving people. And of course, that's what we do at the Housing Authority. And I know that, you all who have been part of the Housing Authority in different roles, whether it's working here, Ms. Spann, I would love to spend some time with you, picking your brain on one-on-one. So let's have a follow-up meeting from your history here in Prince George's County, and then your role now as a landlord. There is no the plan. There are multiple areas of focus, and I think the main thing people say, well, what's your vision? And so the vision really is to make this housing authority work for the people we serve and to be a good partner. And in some places, we're doing a really great job. In others, we've made great strides. In others, we've fallen back. So I've spent my few months here really getting my arms around the agency, learning in some areas in terms of some of the content, of course, around housing and housing development issues, but really focused on the people we serve. And you all have seen, well, I shouldn't say you've seen, I have been fielding a lot of the complaints and issues raised by landlords, either coming directly to me or to my chief operating officer, who is Rachel Joseph. So you all may have seen her name, because what we've decided is to take on a lot ourselves, so that not that we're micromanaging and that we're the ones who can fix things, because it's the very capable team that you all have met some of them who are here this evening, and the people who work for them and with them, who do the work, obviously, but it's really for us to get a sense of what are the big issues, what are the concerns, and what are we hearing from landlords and other stakeholders. And there are themes, and they're very readily identifiable themes. And I will say the first one is one that you've already mentioned, and that is communications and responsiveness. Knowing that those of you who have been with the Housing Authority for many years know that there are lots of issues, there are lots of bumps and snags and bureaucratic issues that get in the way of moving things quickly on a consistent basis. And I think there is, at least when the complaints come to my level, seems to be an appreciation for, look, we know that we're in a pandemic, or we know that there are certain issues, we know that there are limits to what you can do, but what can't be tolerated, and my team knows this, is the lack of responsiveness. And when I get complaints, this is the 4th time. I've been trying for months. I haven't heard from my case manager. I've scheduled inspections and the people didn't show, or lots of issues that we have to increase our customer responsiveness. So that is one thing, and I think that you all will see that pretty soon in terms of better and more direct communications, responsiveness, and even when we don't have the immediate answer or can't fix something immediately, then to acknowledge it and to explain how we're working on it and when we will get back to people. So building in those standards of partnership, and I was going to say customer service, but you guys are our partners. I see us as the Housing Authority, while we are an independent agency, we are really part of the city's landscape in terms of housing affordability. We are part of that whole picture. And there are huge investments that our mayor has made, that the city council has made through multiple agencies, and the Housing Authority plays a role. Now, one big role, of course, we play is providing public housing in our own public housing developments, but an equally big role in actually serving more people are the vouchers and other subsidies that we administer for multiple agencies, and that's where you guys come into play. Now, there are lots of different categories, lots of specialized programs. Some of you are intimately involved with them and acquainted with them, and others may just be part of LRSP, or but you may also be having housing folks from my former agency, Child and Family Services Agency. We had basically a subsidy program, and also some vouchers administered by the Housing Authority. So there are multiple programs. They do have different rules, and I think that can be confusing to people. It's something that I'm kind of sorting through to be clearer about which program is which and whether that makes a difference in terms of the way we administer the program and any kind of different rules or regulations. And we should be transparent, but also we should handle a lot of that behind the scenes so that landlords aren't struggling to figure out should they use this form or that form, or who do they need to call. So we're definitely going to be tightening up on our responsiveness, our partnership, and in terms of keeping you guys in touch. And if this is the vehicle for it, this really helps that as we are making changes, as we bring on new team members. I hope all of you knew Carolyn Punter, who is the senior VP over the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Carolyn sadly left us to go join the federal government, and she had been pursuing that opportunity for quite some time, even before I got here. And we were sorry to lose her and her leadership, but we are recruiting for someone to be the permanent leader, while our very capable team, Aisha Thompson, is in the interim role, and Anissa is her partner. And so we know that the work keeps going. So what you will get from me is, again, you'll get honesty, you'll get straightforwardness, you'll get transparency and responsiveness. So that, I think, is just basic, and you should expect that, and you should hold me accountable for that, and I'll hold my team accountable. I do want to hear, though, about some of your programmatic concerns and other issues that we really need to improve upon. And I'll say one more thing. We are working with, I initiated when I first came on, a meeting with all of our sister agencies who have voucher or subsidy programs that to come together. We are issuing an RFP for a consulting firm to help us to map the whole process from beginning to end. So that's with every agency, from the time of the allocation of funds to the identification of eligible tenants, to all of the processes throughout, so that we can figure out how to streamline and how to improve upon that. This group will be an integral part of that. I was going to say, if you're interested, I know you are, and we need you, because when we do that kind of assessment, we need to look at all of our partners. So we are, I think, issuing the RFP within the next week, and we're hoping to have this as a fairly tight process over, maybe a 60-day process. So that is something you can look forward to, and we certainly will let you know once the consultants have been identified and lay out the steps of the process, and they'll come. Ms. Spann, if I can use you as the point person, and you can decide how you want to engage the rest of your members, but I'm sure there'll be some interviews, maybe some focus groups, and certainly they'll be interested in the survey and issues that you've been struggling with for many years. So that, I think, will help us to figure out where are the kinks in the process, where can we do better, and that will lead us to making some changes over the next few months. I think that's it. I want to hear from you, and then be able to respond, or have members of my team to respond if you want us to respond immediately. If you want us to do follow up, just let us know. But we're here to listen and hopefully provide some answers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that. You've addressed some of the concerns that have come in. I just want to read a few of the questions, the comments and concerns in the chat box. I see someone is asking about the process to, if landlords have a complaint about staff, what is the process to file a complaint or to report their displeasure with any particular voucher DCHA staff?
Ms. Thompson, you want to answer that?
Good afternoon. Well, good evening again, everyone. Yeah, so if the landlords have complaint about any one of the housing program specialists, they will have to, submit that complaint to the direct supervisor. If you do not know who the direct supervisor is, you can always reach out to me and submit the complaint to me, and I will address that with the supervisors and managers. And we will address it with the staff member as well. But any complaints, if you do know the direct supervisors, please send it, but you can also CC me on those complaints as well.
The same thing goes for the inspectors or any ECOD staff. Those complaints should come to the direct supervisors of those staff members, or to me, or both of us, the supervisors and myself, and they will be addressed as quickly as we receive them.
Thank you, Ms. Jones and Ms. Thompson. I have a question that has come in regarding the rent increase. I know that prior to COVID, the DC Housing Authority reported housing providers were not able to get rent increases. So that's one of the questions that have come up frequently. When will they be able to get rent increases?
So we are looking into the whole rental structure. And I know you all have heard previous discussions about looking at, or us adopting, a rent reasonableness tool. And that is something that we have technical assistants helping us to build that tool so that we can really look at the rents all across the city and really determine whether they meet the fair market rental standards for this area. That is something that will have implications for landlords. Some will see rent increases, some will see rent decreases. And it's, I have asked my team, in fact, we have a meeting tomorrow, so that I can start getting a better handle on the analysis that we're doing. We're doing some initial analysis to play that out to see what the impact will be. So obviously, when you have a tool is just that. It's an algorithm that is used to look at the rent. For example, what would rent be for someone who is not subsidized, who doesn't have a voucher? What is that rent, and what is fair based on our local jurisdiction and a variety of factors? And over years, as you all know, Housing Authority has used percentages above the area median income, and those have gone up and those have gone down, and they have steadily, but they have gone up quite a bit in the last few years, to the point where overall, or in some areas, the rent is much, much higher for voucher holders than it is for just someone coming in off the street who could rent the same apartment. We have to right size that. We're going to do it in a fair way. We're going to do it in a transparent way, and we will be coming back to you to share our findings, to talk about implications, and to talk about how that's going to roll out in a way that is fair, that is not like a drastic shock to anyone, but also what makes the most sense. So stay tuned. We will hopefully right after the holidays, we'll be ready to discuss that with you all and talk about how we're gonna start to implement that process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. We have a comment in the chat box about getting emails and notification. And I think that you've touched on that already, saying that we would definitely see improvement on that. But did anybody want to address this comment about a landlord still not getting emails or mail notifications prior to inspections?
Can address that. Go ahead, Ty, did you want to? Okay. Based on just the information that we've gotten on the mail itself, and seeing articles in the news regarding Brentwood Post Office where our mail goes out, and we do know that there has been delays in our mail process. We have checked our landlord portal and made sure that notifications are being emailed to everyone and are posted on the landlord portal. So we enlisted the help of Adrian Hanson, who is in our IT department, and that feature is working. So notifications should be going out via email as of over a month ago. So those notifications should be being mailed, being utilized. Meanwhile, we are still mailing out documents. We are mailing them out 30 days ahead of time. So in terms of the actual mail process, hopefully the mail service improves soon, but we are doing everything we can possibly do to make sure that those notifications are being done timely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Anissa. We have another comment in the chat box. It's pertaining to the delay in rental payments. Can anybody address that? And I know that the agency, the DC Housing Authority, DCHA serves as a hub, but can you speak to the delayed payment that are maybe coming from other agencies?
You want me to take that?
Wait, Mr. Thompson.
Okay. As far as the delay payments with our partners, normally, as you know, our landlords know, we do have different type of subsidies, right? So if the tenants don't have an actual voucher, and they're with, for example, DBH or DHS or DOH, and they haven't received any payment, we will normally ask the landlord to reach out directly to those partnering agencies to, since we technically, based on our MOU or agreement with the other agencies, we don't have that actual relationship with the tenants or the landlords. So we will normally inform the agency as well that landlords are requesting or asking questions about delayed payments. But definitely for those who are voucher holders, and I know, as Director Donald stated, that landlords may not know what subsidies tied to that tenant. So quite often we do get emails about delayed payments, and internally we will kind of decipher, who would naturally actually resolve those issues. But if it's a voucher holder, all those emails actually can come to me, and I will address those delinquent payments and ensure that it's resolved internally if it's DCHA, or if it's one of our partners, we'll definitely reach out on your behalf as well. But we if you do know, we kind of urge that you do, contact, the agencies directly, because sometimes there could just be funding issues or just maybe technical issues. Sometimes technical, we may not know what the delay is sometimes. So it's best to actually talk to those, agencies directly, but we'll assist in every way possible. But if you guys don't know who to reach out to, just send them all to me and I will resolve them internally.
Okay, great.
And
Thank
that's
you.
also, I'll speak on that too, because I think at least with one of our agencies, I think that's more kind of a structural problem that I've been told kind of happens at the end of the fiscal year. And that's fixable. And I've talked to the director, and that'll be part of the kind of mapping out process, that we make sure that we address that. Because if something happens every year at the same time, we should be able to get ahead of it so that it doesn't happen the next year. And that will be my goal, because I know that's a burden on people. And we'll often get, I will get emails from tenants who are really panicking as well, because of course, though we have good tenants who want to make sure that their rent is paid. And so that's a situation that we need to address. And it will be part of the business process mapping that we do. And we're committed to fixing that.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Excuse me. Hey, Carissa, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to touch back on really quick about the emails in regards to the notifications, in regards to landlords receiving them. I just want to piggyback and tell everyone again that please, as a reminder, double check or go into your owner's portal, because the information that has been provided to us, that is the information that we actually send it to. So we do have the updated phone numbers and we do have updated emails. But if anything has changed, as or say, for instance, the owner has an agent involved, we're going to contact or send that information to the email and information that is provided to us. And so I would just advise everyone to double check your owner's portal, ensure that the person or the point of contact or the information that you want to be received to is going to the proper person. I just want to throw that out there to have everyone just double check to make sure that you are on the email in your updated portal.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ty. I have a question in the chat box about a possible ombudsman position. And for those of you who are housing providers and don't know what that is, the Department of Housing and Community Development previously had a position. An ombudsman is someone who worked with stakeholders. So for instance, with the DC Housing Authority, if DCHA was to consider an ombudsman position, essentially that person would serve as the point of contact, the go-to person to help landlords. And so there's a question in the chat box as to whether or not the DCHA would consider a position like this, a problem solver.
Yes, it is something that we're talking about internally, and there are a couple of models that I'll have to confess, ombudsman has connotations for me from my previous job at Child and Family Services Agency. So that's kind of an inside story. But I am looking at, should we have actually, someone else suggested a tenant advocate, or, and which of course for our own customers, but some type of a go-to person may be necessary. We're still looking again at, I think that will come out of the business process mapping, right? I want to understand where the hangups are. And so are we not being responsive because we're not well staffed? We're not being responsive because our systems don't work? Or we're not being responsive because there's some training issues or some accountability, supervisory issues? I'm sure all of those things are going to come into play. So we want to make sure we fix those. And then is there a need for an ombudsman as kind of that neutral person? Because some people feel afraid to raise certain issues because they're worried that, that may put them in bad light, or that they may not be responded to in ways. And there's all sorts of history, I know, that comes with that. So let us work through this process mapping to make sure that we're fixing the systemic issues. And then we're happy to discuss whether or not we need a kind of a liaison go-to person, ombudsman or whatever, in addition to the other structural fixes that we're going to make.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We have a comment in the chat box. And please keep posting your comments, your remarks, your questions in the chat box. Why should a landlord work with the DC Housing Authority if rent increases are not permitted?
So I know everyone makes their own decision about whether or not it makes sense for them from a business standpoint to work with the housing authority. I am not saying that we're not going to look at building in rent increases as part of the business model. That's something for us to look at, but it will be part, if it is, we still have to do the rent reasonableness thing. So if that rent reasonableness means that rents are calibrated in a way that are closer to fair market rent, but that also includes building in rent increases that are consistent with the market, I think that's fair. So, but that said, every landlord has to make their own decision about whether or not this partnership makes sense for you. We hope that it does, and that because there's much greater need out there for the tens of thousands of people who rely on housing choice vouchers and the additional resources that are coming from the city government funds and will come from federal funds. So there certainly will be more dollars, and there's great need, and that we hope that we are good enough partners that landlords will want to be part of this. But if this doesn't make sense for you from a business standpoint, I think that's an individual decision that everyone has to make.
Okay, thank you for that. I see your hand, Guy. Let me go to some more of the questions, and then you'll be the first person that I'll ask to unmute and make your comment or ask your question, Guy. So there is a question pertaining to the lease-up process. Someone is asking, what is the process due to COVID?
I could take that one. Whoever asked the question, are you referring to submitting the RFTA through the landlord portal? Because the process due to COVID still remains the same pre-COVID and at this point, because we still use the landlord portal to submit your RFTA packets. What we're asking our landlords to do is to please ensure that if you're an existing or new landlord, please include all the required documents that are on the form. What is actually causing the delay is that missing documents from the packet. And if that information is not provided to the housing specialist within the first 5 days, the packet will be canceled. If you do have logging information, or if you're logging in as a guest, you still have access to the updates in the portal. So the timeline for the RFTA process or the lease-up process is outlined on the RFTA. I know folks may want to move in the following month after the RFTA has been submitted. However, if the RFTA is not complete by the 5th of the month, it will be delayed until the following month. So it would not be the first of the next month, but will be delayed another 30 days. So we're asking all landlords, please be mindful to please submit all required documents, because then once the specialist reviews it and they put the comment in and you get alerted that something is missing, we would like the information back as soon as possible to prevent any delays, but the process is still the same.
Thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question pertaining to the security deposit assistance. I know that there was a batch of participants, tenants who receive security deposit assistance. Does the voucher program provide security deposit assistance for all voucher holders or just a certain? Okay, I see your head's nodding, Anissa and Aisha.
All right, I'll just take that one, and Kirk can piggyback. So as far as the security deposits are concerned, only our local program tenants will receive security deposits. So the initial lease up for that means brand new, clients that are coming onto the program, they're from the locally funded program, they're eligible to receive a security deposit. For those who are transferring from one unit to a next, and there are local or if any kind of emergency situation that the housing specialist will have to deem as an emergency. If it's within the first 2 years that they haven't received a security deposit, then they can get another one, but it's only for the locally funded tenants. So Kirk can chime in, because when they're doing the briefing, the families are actually informed. So I'll let Kirk let you guys know how the families are informed upfront.
So during our briefings, we instruct all of our participants on who will receive the actual security deposits, and those who do not or do not qualify for the security deposits are giving information of other agencies that assist with security deposit. And we inform them how to contact those agencies, when to contact those agencies. And we also inform them that the agencies don't always have funding. So they have to be diligent about doing their work to find a unit, move forward, do the due process so that they can qualify when those funding are available. So they are given plenty of information to actually deal with those situations.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Kirk. I have one more question. Someone is asking if the relationship is not working with the landlord, how do they exit the program?
I can take that one. And if I understand the question correctly, are you inquiring about the relationship between the tenant and the landlord, as far as if there are any lease violations and so forth, and you want to terminate your tenancy? I'm not quite sure who asked the question.
Vanetta, can you explain this question, please? The question is, what if the partnership no longer makes sense? How does the landlord exit? And while we're waiting on her to, Vanetta Hayes, if you could just unmute yourself and explain this question so that we can get this answered for you. Vanetta, are you still here? Vanetta Hayes. So while we're waiting.
To terminate the relationship with DC Housing and the tenant.
Okay, okay.
So Aisha.
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
She stated that terminate the relationship with DC Housing and the tenant.
Okay. So technically under the voucher program, if the lease terminates, so does the HAB contract. So that becomes a landlord-tenant issue at that first point, because if you want to terminate the lease with your client, that's between you and the tenant as a landlord. But once that lease is terminated, so does the HAB contract is terminated. The housing authority doesn't actually terminate your contract unless it's an HQS violation going on, and you're in an abatement, then the contract will eventually terminate. However, if it technically starts with the landlord and tenant, and once the lease is terminated between you both, then we'd be notified and we go ahead and terminate the contract, because the contract would automatically terminate at that point as well.
And let me just also add to that. Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson, for your response. Let me just also add that in the District of Columbia, it's really a challenge. It's a task to get a tenant out. So of course you could terminate the lease, but you would have to take that tenant to court, and it would be ultimately for the court or the judge to determine whether or not that tenant has to move, will be evicted, or whether they can stay. So here's something to consider for you, Ms. Hayes, or anybody who has this question. You want to terminate the contract with the agency. So at the point of terminating the contract with the agency, you will no longer get assistance from that tenant, from the agency for the tenant. Now, just because that contract is terminated does not mean that that tenant must move the next day. That means that the contract is terminated, there is no housing subsidy coming in, that's still your tenant. So now you must take that tenant to court, and as long as that tenant is in place, if the tenant doesn't pay, then that's your problem. So just look at that situation. I would recommend that you speak to a landlord and tenant attorney who is knowledgeable about the voucher program. I recognize that all attorneys are not knowledgeable about the voucher program. So make sure that when you are seeking legal assistance and guidance on how to get out of this situation, that is someone who understands the program, because I've had landlords who complain that they had an attorney who gave them wrong information, wrong advice, and they had to pay for bad information. So do your research and make sure that you are getting legal help to help you in this situation. So there are some other questions in the chat box about water bills and tenant issues and things of that nature. So I'm going to ask Guy if you would unmute yourself after I give this response. But here is my answer for some of the questions that have come in pertaining to the water bill. If you have a tenant who's not paying a water bill, the DC Housing Authority, who would be the point of contact if a landlord has a complaint that tenants are not paying a water bill?
It would be, we have a mediation inbox because we do get quite a few of them, especially over during the COVID period, about folks, tenants who are not paying rent, delinquent water bill, moved out, left the water bill. So we do have mediation who is actually attempting to mediate those concerns between the landlord and tenants. So I will put the mediation email in the chat. So if you do have any issues with the water bill, you can go ahead and send those concerns to mediation, and our QA department will handle those concerns.
Okay, thank you so much for that. If can you put that email in the chat box? And I'm going to ask Guy if you will unmute yourself. We're drawing near of time.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, I want to thank you and thank the director and the staff for answering our questions. I know we don't have much time left. I'm hoping they can stay a little bit longer past 7 because there are a lot of questions in the chat, and I hope they can all see the chat and maybe address some of those questions later, because I know a couple of things I've typed in haven't been addressed yet. So hopefully the director will take some time and take a look at those questions in the chat. One of them is that I want to know how large the waiting list is right now for voucher applicants, both for the federal and the local programs. And I bring that up because, we talk a lot about the Housing Preservation Trust Fund and the millions of dollars they get. And we talk a lot about the need to help homeless people get off the streets. And there seems to be, a lot of money in it. And then the Biden bill, the Build Back Better bill, there seems to be money from HUD and other places to try to end homelessness. And those are all great goals, and we all support that. And Stay DC and other programs are trying to do that. But if there's a waiting list, and that seems like, the low-hanging fruit, shouldn't you be spending money trying to get people off the waiting list? And I'm wondering if this is the wrong time to be focusing on making it harder or less attractive for landlords by not increasing rents and not, looking at, being kind of, thin on what you call the reasonableness thing. While it sounds good, I think in practice, it's just going to discourage both the landlords from taking people off of your waiting list, and it's going to take the focus off of you reducing your waiting list, because now you're tweaking pricing, and I think the pricing is going to affect the waiting list. And I want to know how many people you have on the waiting list, what the percentage of the increase in waiting list is this year over last year, those kind of things. So if you could talk about your waiting list.
Yep. Let me jump in because you asked several things. Some of them are connected. So the waiting list is frozen. The waiting list has been frozen since 2013. There's some 40,000 people on the waiting list. And we are starting to chip away at the waiting list in very small numbers in multiple ways. One is that we are also our own landlord. So I have 1,500 vacant units that we are looking to bring. Some of them need to be rehabilitated and brought online. And we're doing that over this next year. And we're also going to the waiting list because some people do want public housing. So that's how we're addressing some of the waiting list. Others, of course, we get referrals that come through if they're homeless through the continuum of care. And then from some of our agencies where we have clients who are customers who need specific kind of housing depending on the program. So that's a long process, and there's obviously huge need, but also just to put it in context of that, those on the waiting list, I think, I forgot what the number is, Anissa or Aisha from our latest report, but 7,000 or 8,000 of those are already housed. So they may prefer to have a voucher, or someone may prefer to be in public housing, but they are housed at least in some other federal programs. So I don't want to paint the picture that we got 40,000 people who are sleeping on the street, because we know that's not true, according to the city's homeless census that they do every year. Now, that said, there's no question there's a gap between people who need housing and housing availability. I would say this, and I do want to have longer and more conversations with you all when we do the analysis on the rent reasonableness tool. The fact that we have over the years paid increased to 187% of AMI for rent means that fewer people get served, that we pay more for fewer people. And so when we look at rent reasonableness, and I'll give an extreme example, because fortunately, hopefully, there are not that many of these, but if I'm sitting here in my office at the Housing Authority, and I look at the building that's right next door at the Ava apartment building, and that building, I know you all aren't the big landlords, but this is my example. And that building has 3 one-bedroom units, and those one-bedroom units, depending on the square footage, depending on the layout, the height, and the building, the view, they may have 3 different rents, and the rent may be $1,800 for one, it may be $2,100 for another, maybe $2,300. We come in with the way we have been paying rent, and we have our rent standard that says we're going to pay up to $2,500. What are you as a landlord going to pick? You're going to give us the $1,800 one or the $2,100, even the same that I would pay if I'm just coming in as a tenant saying, oh, I'm interested in that unit, and I get qualified and all, I'm paying what that rent is. You see the Housing Authority comes and they're like, oh, we're going to charge you all $2,500. So we do that multiple times, then we have fewer people because the voucher numbers are tied to dollars. So a lot of people look at how many vouchers do we have. The voucher numbers are estimates based on the total dollars. So we had $11.7 million that we got in emergency housing vouchers from the federal government under the CARES Act. And everyone said at first, oh, that's going to buy about 700 vouchers. Well, maybe not, because we pay more per unit, we pay higher. So that is going to translate into more like 525 or 550, maybe, vouchers. Whereas in another jurisdiction, or even here, if we were paying closer to the market rent, we could house more people and still pay a fair rent that meets the need, that is reflective of what that unit is worth. I think we go more to a reasonable rent that's fair, then we can consider building in rent increases. And so I think it's a both and we will come back and talk to you when we have real numbers to really sit down and talk about the implications and how we're going to implement that.
Yeah, I would just encourage you to look at the timing of that. I think during this, and that may be good for the future, but I don't think within this next year you should be focused on that, because until you get a little more handle on, especially the small landlords versus the large landlords.
We're looking at that. We're breaking it. Yep, sir. We're breaking it down. That's what I've asked for. The team came back and said, oh, we're ready to roll this out. And I said, no. I want to know how many small landlords we have, how many people are in the, how many tenants are served by small landlords. Where are those properties? Are they likely to go up or go down? There's some, depending on where the property is, particularly in Ward 7 and 8, whether the rates are likely to go up because the fair market rate standard we've been using still doesn't meet that rent reasonableness. So give us a minute to do the analysis. That's why I don't want, and the only reason I'm saying it now is because I told you I'm going to be transparent. I'm not trying to panic anybody because we don't know yet. We haven't crunched the numbers and we want to look at the implications. If they are big, obviously we're not going to slam somebody and say, next month your rent is gonna, that we're not. So that's why I'm looking at it all across the board. Then that will help us to decide what is a fair way to start implementing it. It may be with new tenants. It may be just at research time. There are lots of ways you can slice it, but let's look at it first. I promise you I will come back. We're going to put it on the table. We're going to have those conversations, but we have to move in this direction. I look back some years ago and where we were in terms of the rent standard and how many vouchers and how much it cost us. We have gone through the roof, and we are actually able to serve fewer people. It's not a sustainable model, and it's not fair and it's not reasonable, but we will roll it out in a reasonable way, and we will do it with you, and you all will know exactly what to expect.
So inflation is coming, and you're taking inflation
Takes into consideration. That is built into the model. So again, let me come back with all the factors, what's taken into consideration, which includes inflation and other variables, and let's talk about it, and then let's come back and figure it out. That's all I ask you. It will not be done to you in a blind way. It will be done with you in ways that we all are going to figure out. So that's what I can ask.
I also wanted to clarify one other thing, Carissa. Mr. Durant asked about the different waiting lists. There is one waiting list. So that one waiting list has 3 different categories. And as the director stated, people can be registered under those 3 categories, which are moderate rehab, which is like project-based, voucher program, and public housing. So people can have an application on all 3 different categories of that waiting list, but the list has been closed since April of 2013.
Okay. I'm looking at Marcy's question in the chat box. She says, agencies such as DCRA have made a noticeable effort to put updated web-based systems in place. Is DCHA looking to update systems?
Yes, yes, we are. Coming soon.
All right, great. Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask that for some of you who you've posted your question in the chat box, if we have not addressed it, if there's something in particular we can cover before we bring this to a close. And let me just say that we are normally here for 1 hour from 6 to 7 p.m. We recognize that we can't answer everybody's question here, but I do want to make sure that we're addressing as much as we can. So if you have a question that has not been addressed so far, I'll ask that you unmute yourself and do that now, please.
Hi, Carissa, it's Marcy. I put in the chat a question about the response times that the DCHA employees are required to respond. A long time ago when I worked in DC government myself, our agency was very big on the whole, I think it's we'll respond within 24 hours of the next business day.
Yes,
and we were held accountable to that.
yes, ma'am.
I personally, in my experience with DCHA, have found that well, that's where my question comes from. Is there such a thing as that?
Yes, we will. We will be building that standard back in. I too come from agencies where we actually had report cards and had to, we got shamed at cabinet meetings. There were secret chopper calls, but yes, we have to implement those standards. So that is all part of it that I talked about in the beginning about responsiveness. And that's something that is expected, but as I'm, getting a handle at what are the reasons for, as I talked about earlier, lack of responsiveness. Is it that people are overworked? Do they need additional training? Are there some technology issues, whatever? So again, this process we're going through to try to get a handle on what are some of the roadblocks to delivering quality service, we will address those, but the expectations are that people are responsive, they acknowledge emails, they return phone calls, and if you're not getting that level of responsiveness, you're free to elevate it to me, and then we will try to solve the problem through my office, and then also try to get at the systemic issues, because there are systemic issues. They may be individual staff who are not performing, but there may be other issues as well. So just give me a little, a minute more, but still, if you have issues now and you're not getting the responsiveness, most people know how to find me, bdonald@dchousing.org. People have found me, and please elevate. I don't want people struggling with issues for months and months or weeks and weeks. I mean, and those are the emails that I get. And I know people are at their wits' end and have, had to deal with a lot of stuff that's unnecessary. So please elevate. Then I send it over to Ms. Thompson and Ms. Jones, and then they push it forward. But we will be improving our standards. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess one other follow-up question is, I know you are new, and so therefore, of course, we have to give you time to do your assessment and decide, which way is the best way to move forward. But I'm wondering if you have a timeline that you might be able to give us to say, give me 6 months so we can kind of have an idea of like when we can, we'll give you a lull, but
yeah, sure.
In 6 months that, you feel like you guys are gonna, have these things in place, then we know that come, 6 months from now that we can look to expect to have these improvements. So do you have a timeline?
Well, yeah, I'm still assessing, but I do operate with a sense of urgency. So I will say it's the assessment, the business process mapping that we're going to do with the consultant, that'll be over the next couple of months, because we still have to procure the consultant and map out that process. But in terms of responsiveness, you should expect that right now. You should expect that your emails and your calls are answered. And if they're not, as I said, then you elevate to me, and we will at least be able to address issues while we're fixing the system. So I'm not asking people to wait until I've assessed everything and we've gotten trained and we've improved all our. I'm saying if you have, right now you have issues or needs or need information, or then please, you should, send your emails, and you should expect immediate responsiveness. And if not, as I said, you elevate and we'll address the problem. And as we're trying to assess what are the systemic issues.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I do see that there's a comment in the chat box about rapid rehousing. So let me just say that rapid rehousing is a different program that is not necessarily administered by the DC Housing Authority. And so if you are a landlord and you have rapid rehousing tenants, there are different agencies, sub-agencies that administer the rapid rehousing program. So that's a different organization that if you have those questions or complaints, the DC Housing Authority don't have case managers for the rapid rehousing. That may be through a different program. So please, if you need any help trying to find out the agency, if you can't get that information from your tenant, please email me and I'll try to help you with that information, and just probably try to connect you with the Department of
Human Services.
Human Services, yes, thank you so much. All right, I do recognize that we were not able to address everybody's question in the chat box. DCHA staff, they've been really great with answering as much as they could. We will send out minutes and notes from this session. We will follow up. We meet every third Wednesday of the month. If you have questions or concerns, the staff, they provided their contact emails. Please check the chat box. This information will be in the email as well. We hope that you will join us next month. Any questions, complaints, or concerns, please feel free to email me. My email address is carissa@dchpa.org. Feel free to CC me on emails that you send to Housing Authority staff if I could try to help mediate situations and get you to the right person. Thank you all so much for your time. Our time is up. We thank you for yours. You'll get the replay, you'll get the minutes, and we hope to see you all next month. And happy holidays to you.
Carissa, it's Marcy. Can I add one other point?
Yes.
So I just wanted to remind folks about the survey. I am going to resend it via email, I think, rather than via chat. And also, I'm hoping that Ms. Donald, that at some point, once we finish pulling together all of this data, what we're looking to do is actually to categorize all of the responses to try to get to the crux of the situation for our housing providers. And, we'll be breaking it down into, for instance, inspections by staff and so forth and so on. And then we'll also have some clear suggestions that we pulled together from the survey as well to provide to you. And we hope that, maybe we can meet, maybe Carissa and I and Rashonda can meet and review these findings with you all one-on-one via Zoom.
That would be great.
Yeah, and then that way you guys can have an idea of what the landlords are feeling right now, and it's in a nice, concise report for you.
That would be great. And if we could meet before the year is out, or maybe in early January, and then if I could come back at your January meeting, then I'll have updates for you. Certainly we'll be ready in a strong place in terms of the rent reasonableness issue. And there should be some other progress that I can report on as well. But if you get the survey results to me earlier, then we can factor all of those in and then have a substantive report for your January meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
It's nice meeting everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Good night.
Everyone have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.